Hi, I welcome you all in YuktMind's unique initiative 10 Minutes and Newspaper Done. In this video, we'll be covering 10th July's The Hindu newspaper. You can download the PDF of these news from our website www.yuktmind.com under the Current Affairs tab. Also, you can download the PDF from our Telegram channel, the link of which is given in description below. Let's get started. So, in this video, we'll be covering 7 news, starting with Turtles Help Clean the Ganga, Impact of Pandemic on Education, Anya Bhaga Fiasco, Restoring the WTO, Bad Loans, Primary Forest Cover, and at last LVM 3. The first news. Under the Namami Gange program, large scale human efforts have been undertaken since 2014 to clean the Ganga. In this, marine life, especially turtles, has been playing a key role. So, how do turtles help? About a dozen of the 29 turtle species in India, both herbivorous and carnivorous, help by clearing rotten or half burnt human bodies as well as flowers dumped into the river. The quality of water in Ganga has improved, and the turtles have a role as they feed on meat and waste products thrown in the river. Improvements in biochemical oxygen demand, fecal coliform, and dissolved oxygen levels were seen during river water quality checks. The second news. The pandemic led to a decline in educational performance of many districts in the country, reveals a report from the Education Ministry. The Performance Grading Index for Districts, that is PGID, released by the Ministry on 9th July as a combined report for 2020-21 and 21-22, assesses the performance of school education system at the district level. Much like the PGI for states released earlier, this report too has 10 grades under which districts are categorized, with Daksh being the highest grade above 90%, followed by Utkarsh, Ati Uttam, Uttam, and so on, with Akanshi 3 as the lowest grade for districts that score less than 10%. While none of the districts were able to earn Daksh, the highest grading, and Utkarsh, in the latest report, 121 districts were graded as Ati Uttam for 2020 and 21. Though this number fell by more than half in 21-22, with just 51 districts making the grade. The PGID report is expected to help state education departments identify gaps at the district level and improve their performance in a decentralized manner. The third news. The Anya Bhagya scheme is one of the five main election promises made by the Congress party in the run up to the Karnataka Assembly elections in May 2023, with the pledge to provide an additional 5 kilograms of free rice to every member of a below poverty line household. Even the fiercest critics of the PDS were compelled to recognize its key role in protecting people from hunger during the COVID 19 related lockdowns. Many believe that the coverage of 80 crore people during the pandemic is laudable. However, besides inadequate coverage in most states, the PDS does not provide nutritious food items such as pulses and oil. There are two lacunae that should be rectified. The first is the problem is that even in 2023, India continues to use the 2011 census population. The NFSA requires that the latest completed census be used to calculate the total PDS coverage. The second problem is discontinuation of the OMSS. The Food Corporation of India procures grain for three broad purposes. The first is it supports producers by procuring mainly wheat and rice at minimum support prices. Secondly, the central government uses this to meet the needs of the PDS, that is, providing 5 kilograms a person every month free to NFSA households, a consumer subsidy. Third, the stocks are used for price stabilization through the open market sales scheme. The center government has given three reasons for the discontinuation of open market sales scheme for state governments. The first is it claims that the open market sales scheme can perform its price stabilization role better if the grain is released through the market rather than through states or the PDS. This is not a convincing argument as the two are more or less equivalent. In fact, there is no guarantee that private traders who get OMSS rice at fixed prices will pass on the benefits to consumers. Two, the central government has expressed worries about maintaining grain stocks at a comfortable level. While it may be true that procurement this year will be lower than previous years, what the government fails to mention is that its current stock position is in fact very comfortable. Third, it has reportedly stated that state governments are going to give the food grains to the same beneficiaries as under the NFSA or for beneficiaries of state schemes, and that the center government has an obligation to the 600 million people who are not covered by the PDS. The central government's obligation to the 600 million people outside the PDS is best met by other means. For example, updating PDS coverage by using the projected population for 2023. So, what are the options before the Karnataka government? It is also time to think beyond rice and wheat through the PDS. When it comes to Karnataka's neighbors such as Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh and elsewhere, such as in Himachal Pradesh, PDS ration card holders get heavily subsidized pulses and oil through the PDS. The Karnataka government is well placed to expand its PDS to include 1.1 million excluded people and provide them with 5 kilograms of grain a person every month, either rice or millets or combination of the two. The fourth news. In June 2022, the member countries of the WTO managed to hammer out a face saving deal in which India played a vital role at the Geneva Ministerial Conference, thereby keeping faith in trade multilateralism alive. An important part was resurrecting the WTO's dispute settlement system, that is DSS, also called WTO's crown jewel by 2024. Since 2019, the WTO's two-tier DSS remain paralyzed. The appellate body, which is the second tier of the WTO's DSS that hears appeals from the WTO panel, is non-functional because the United States single-handedly has blocked the appointment of its members. However, the appellate body has become a victim of its own success. Its one-time supporter, the US has become its hardcore critic. So, the US criticizes the appellate body for judicial overreach and exceeding its assigned institutional mandate. One major problem that the US identifies is that the appellate body, contrary to the text of the WTO's dispute settlement understanding, that is DSU, has been creating binding precedents through its decisions. It is well established that there is no rule of stare decisis, that is, no rule of precedent in international law. To the WTO's DSU also makes this clear in Article 3.2 by stating that the appellate body rulings can neither add nor diminish the rights and obligations of WTO member countries. However, the same article also says the dispute settlement system of the WTO is a central element in providing security and predictability to the multilateral trading system. Thus, it is incumbent on the appellate body to ensure that there is consistency in the interpretation and application of the WTO rules. This requires striking a fine balance, precisely what the appellate body has tried to do. It has encouraged the WTO panels to rely on previous interpretations, especially where the issues are the same. Simultaneously, the appellate body has clarified that a departure can be made from the previous rulings and reasoning if there are cogent reasons. Moreover, the appellate body is not the only international court that follows its previous decisions. Other international courts, such as the International Court of Justice and the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, also follows past decisions unless there are valid reasons not to do so. The larger game plan of the US seems to be the de-judicialization of trade multilateralism as we know it. Hans Petersman, an international economic lawyer, argued that in a neoliberal economic system, the invisible hand of market competition should be complemented by the visible hand of the law. The WTO became this visible hand of the law to regulate global trade. This period saw not only the legalization of international relations, but also its judicialization. This arguably erodes the sovereignty of nations as they lose control over their critical decision making. So, dejudicialization is a reverse phenomena where countries weaken international courts to take back decision making power. Given the emerging geoeconomic challenges posed by a rising China, the US wants to exercise full power over its trade policies, throwing off the shackles of the appellate body's judicial review. So, what are the options? It will be very difficult to negotiate with the US to put the appellate body back on track. One option that the other countries have is to elect the appellate body members by resorting to voting at the WTO's General Council meeting. The fifth news. Just 4 years ago, Indian Bank's non performing assets, that is NPA ratio, was the worst among the most emerging economies. A loan turns bad or becomes an NPA if it is overdue for over 90 days. The NPA ratio is the proportion of such NPAs in total loans. In the second quarter of 2019, the NPA ratio of Indian banks was 9.2%, that is, almost 1 in 10 loans had turned bad. Between 2016 and 2019, the NPA ratio remained high, began to decline later, and continued to do so even during the pandemic. So there could be several reasons for this fall. First, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code helped the recovery of sick loans. Second, banks stopped lending big money to industries and increased their share of personal loans. However, questions remained. First, it was not known during and soon after the pandemic what share of poor loan accounts under COVID 19 related moratorium would turn into NPAs. The second issue was the sudden shift in portfolio from industry to personal loans. What if customers who secured personal loans were not able to service their loans too? Given that industries which pay salaries to these customers were not functioning well. Third, the fall in NPAs, especially in financial year 20, can be largely attributed to loan write offs. Banks have to set aside or provision a part of their profit as a buffer for potential losses that may arise from NPAs. However, the latest financial stability report released by the RBI last month answers some of these questions. Gross non-performing assets and net NPAs continued to decline and in March 2023 reached 3.9% and 1% respectively, the lowest level since 2015. The profitability of the banking sector has seen a marked improvement. The return on assets climbing to 1.1% in 2023, up from a negative 0.2% in 2018. The ratio of write offs to GNPAs, which had been on a consistent downward trend during 2021 and 21-22, however, there was a rise in this ratio in 22-23, primarily due to substantial write offs by private sector banks. The GNPA ratio of personal loans by category has declined against all types of personal loans, such as housing, credit cards, vehicle loans, and education loans. But the fact that write offs continue to play a significant part in the reduction of NPAs is a cause for concern. The sixth news. According to new research quoted by World Resources Institute's Global Forest Watch, tropical areas lost 4.1 million hectares of forest cover, equivalent to losing an area of 11 football fields per minute in 2022. This forest loss produced 2.7 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions, which is around the same as India's annual emissions due to combustion of fossil fuels. According to the University of Maryland, primary forest cover loss in tropical areas in 2022 was 10% more than in 2021. So, what are primary forests? Primary forests are mature, natural forests that have remained undisturbed in recent history. They often store more carbon than other forests and are rich sources of biodiversity. Primary forest loss is almost irreversible in nature. Even if the green cover regrows, a secondary forest is unlikely to match the extent of biodiversity and carbon sequestering capabilities of a primary forest. So let us talk about Global Forest Watch findings. The world is not on track to meet most of its forest related commitments. WRI measures progress on two goals: ending deforestation by 2030 and restoring 350 million hectares of lost and degraded forests by 2030. So, to meet the target of restoring 350 million hectares of forests globally by 2030, the world needs to increase tree cover by 22 million hectares per year between 2021 and 2030. Despite registering some gains, the overall change in tree cover in past 20 years was a net loss of 100 million hectares. This means that we are still losing forests and not restoring them at the required rate. Brazil and the Democratic Republic of Congo are the two countries with the most tropical forest cover, and both registered for losses of this resource in 2022. Forest loss in the Amazon basin not only affects carbon but also regional rainfall. If deforestation continues at the current rate, it may eventually lead to a tipping point that, if crossed, could convert most of the ecosystem into a savanna. The Democratic Republic of Congo lost more than half a million hectares of primary forest cover in 2022. A $500 million agreement was signed at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in 2021 in Glasgow to protect the Congo's forests, but it is yet to have an impact on the deforestation rate in the country. On the other hand, Indonesia and Malaysia managed to keep their primary forest cover loss to record low levels in 2022. Let us talk about India's performance. According to Global Forest Watch, India lost 43.9 thousand hectares of humid primary forest between 21 and 22, which accounts for 17% of the country's total tree cover loss in the period. The total tree cover loss in India between 21 and 22 was 255,000 hectares. The total global tree cover loss in 2022 declined by 10%. This includes primary, secondary, and planted forests. This decrease, according to Global Forest Watch, is a direct result of decrease in fire-related forest losses, which decreased 28% from 2021. Non-fire losses in 2022 increased by slightly less than 1%. The final news of the day. ISRO has three classes of launch vehicles: the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, that is PSLV, the Geosynchronous Satellite Launch Vehicle, that is GSLV, and the new Small Satellite Launch Vehicle, that is SSLV. Of these, ISRO has launched the PSLV the most. It has a famous reputation as a workhorse with a very low failure rate. The PSLV can lift up to 3.8 tons to low Earth orbit. ISRO developed and uses the GSLV to launch heavier payloads and, if required, into higher orbits. Like the PSLV, the GSLV also has multiple configurations. The most powerful configuration is LVM-3, short for Launch Vehicle Mark 3. It can lift up to 10 tons to low Earth orbit. Let us talk about LVM-3. The LVM-3 has three stages. The first, or the bottommost, stage is in the form of two S-200 boosters strapped to the sides of the rocket body. They combust a solid fuel called hydroxyl terminated polybutadiene. The second stage is powered by two Vikas engines which combust a liquid fuel, either nitrogen, tetroxide, or unsymmetrical dimethyl hydrazine. The uppermost final stage is powered by a cryogenic engine. It combusts liquefied hydrogen with liquefied oxygen. Hydrogen has a very specific impulse as rocket fuels go, but using it in an engine requires it to be liquefied first, which in turn means it must be stored at very low temperature and with special pumping and transportation system. ISRO will launch its Chandrayaan 3 mission on July 14th on board an LVM-3. Now, at last, let us discuss UPSC Civil Services Prelims Examination previous year question, which was asked in the year 2021. At the national level, which ministry is the nodal agency to ensure effective implementation of the Scheduled Tribes and other traditional forest dwellers Recognition of Forest Rights Act 2006? The option A is Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Option B is Ministry of Panchayati Raj. Option C is Ministry of Rural Development. Option D is Ministry of Tribal Affairs. The correct answer would be option D, Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Thank you for watching this video. You can download the PDF of these news from our website www.yuktmind.com under the Current Affairs tab. You can also download the PDF from our Telegram channel, the link of which is given in description below. Thank you.